Thank you very much, John, and thank you for having me again. Just very grateful to be here tonight or this afternoon, wherever you are. So it's never fails to astound me how what Doreen is saying when I join is always exactly in line with what's been happening during the day, during the week, and this theme of quickening. It is very relevant to what I wanted to say this evening, because there are certain things that do speed up our awakening and fundamental aspects of our awakening, especially the embodiment process, which I'm very, very passionate about, which tends to be where we can experience these delays in our journey, in our pathway, where we may have seen clearly what we are, but coming to live as that can be quite problematic for a lot of beings. It certainly was for myself. And one of the major things that when I really grasped clearly inside myself, really began to move forward, began to embody this much easier, was really the recognition that there are two aspects of myself. They're both the same one, both the same being, but that I am appearing as this limited, separate being with all its conditioned ways of thinking. So we have our egoic sense of self, all of our beliefs, all of our ways of looking at the world, looking at ourselves, looking at awakening, the prevailing way that we see the world and ourselves. And we also have this other option. We can experience ourselves as the unlimited, infinite self, the vast formlessness that we are in our primary way. And most of us are struggling to live in this primary way. We're trying to be that formlessness. We're trying to recognize it more in our life and our experience. And most of us set about doing this by trying to push against this limited, constricted sense of self with all of its programming and all of its beliefs. And it really is a simple thing to begin to understand, and yet for a long time we struggle to hear that we don't have to get rid of this tangled mess of beliefs that we all have inside us. Once we begin to experience what's the ultimate truth about us, that we are a vast, expansive being, that we're not really in any particular place, and actually in every place, and that there is only the one of us here, we can naturally, the next step seems to be to try to get rid of this smaller aspect of us, this conditioned egoic self with all of its beliefs. And if we can grasp on a very fundamental level that the moment we try to push against this limited self, let's call it limited, then we are actually being that egoic self, that limited self. And of course, we've all heard this phrase that what we resist persists, and what we look at goes away, or what we accept goes away. But actually applying it to our spiritual practice can be a little more challenging. So I really just wanted to take a look at this. What does it mean in our everyday life? If we can accept that these thoughts and feelings, these conditioned ways of thinking, are programmed into our mind through a combination of beliefs we've brought into this body-mind vehicle and our experiences since we began to collect experiences, and that we always have a choice in any particular moment how to respond to those beliefs, that egoic sense of self. And how we respond to the ego is going to determine how much we suffer or not in any moment. There's a fundamental shift happens, an absolute quickening when we begin to interact with our egoic sense of self as the expansive being. And if we look at the expansive being, the formlessness, the silence that we really are, we can see that it's not trying to get rid of anything at all. We can see that it doesn't have these ideas that ego is worse than, or it's bad, or it's wrong. It also doesn't have the capacity to say that it shouldn't be, that whatever is in this moment shouldn't be, which is what most of us are doing most of the time with our mind, with our egoic sense of self, with our negative emotions. And it seems counterintuitive at first to accept that whatever we can welcome and invite into our heart, that it's going to dissolve and disappear. Most of us had reinforced from a very early age this idea that if we push against something, it's going to go away. And we try this, of course, our whole life, but never more so than when we realize that this separate sense of self is not the fundamental thing that we are, that it's something, a kind of mask we were wearing, or trying on how it feels to be a separate being. As the infinite self, we're kind of exploring what it feels like to be a someone for a while. So how to work with this to allow our awakening to really deepen. And I've called it many, many names, called it silence, called it this word noumenon, called it the stillness and expansive being. The word I tend not to use so much is love, because we have some pre-programmed ideas about what love is. But the silence, the stillness is love. There is no difference between those. It's just another name. All these names are names for love, the love that we are. And that love, in that moment when a thought arises that we'd rather not have, or an emotion surges that we wish we didn't have to feel, we can notice that initial urge to push that away. And we also have a choice to accept that it is there. In that way, we get to choose whether we stick at only this conditioned response, I don't like you, I don't want you, you should go away, whether we add onto that this clearer seeing that there's also some part of me that is totally allowing this emotion, this state, this whatever is happening in my mind to exist. And I've had several conversations this week already about this myth in our consciousness that somehow beings that have managed to free themselves of this conditioning completely, this limited sense of self, have done so by getting rid of it and pushing it away. In reality, it's the exact opposite. And we all can use some reminder of this every now and again, that what we respond to with love as love is going to is going to feel more welcome. When we're saying that something should not exist, we're really saying that we should not exist, because this thought, this emotion, this conditioned way of being is really something that we've given birth to inside our own being, some idea that we've created, of course not on a conscious level. If we're saying that it should go away with our energy, if we're pushing against it, then we're really pushing against ourselves. We're really pushing against this moment. And there's no difference in how much it hurts to push against thoughts and to push against ourselves. It's like saying all these things I created should not exist. They should disappear. Only when we can welcome them back into our life can we begin to allow them to dissipate. It's as if they have to come back in to leave once and for all. So why do we push against that so much? Why is that not our natural skill, so to speak? When I really looked at this within myself, why am I resisting these emotions? Why am I resisting these thoughts, these ways of thinking and feeling about myself? Very negative ways of thinking about myself, other beings, these judgments about myself and others, all of that. And it really came down to that I wasn't really clear on what love is. It doesn't have these better or worse categories. It doesn't have wanted and not wanted categories. It doesn't look at our egoic expression and say this is bad and the pure unconditioned self is good or better. It just doesn't have those distinctions, does it? It doesn't say that fear is bad and bliss is good. It doesn't even really label things in that way. It just allows whatever exists to exist. And if you really look at why we say something is wanted or not wanted, it's really based on how it makes us feel. If some fear comes up, then I begin to feel bad, and I'll say that it's not wanted because it makes me feel bad. But if you can see that it feels bad because I'm saying it's not wanted, then we can experience this fundamental shift in the way we handle things. Some part of our being is never going to welcome ego, and that is ego. But there is also in every moment this ability to switch to the viewpoint of the self. What is the self doing with anything that arises in each moment? It's just completely allowing it to be. So can you have both of these attitudes, for want of a better word? Can you totally allow how you are in this moment, accepting what has shown up for you as you is already here, therefore it's pointless to push against it, and also prefer something different in the next moment? It's totally okay to accept that you feel a certain way in this moment without liking it. Accepting it, loving it, means allowing it to exist. It doesn't mean enjoying it or liking it or even wanting it to stay. So you end up with this kind of position of, this thing is here right now, I'm going to honor it because it's here. It's something I've created. I've created this emotion inside me due to my previous thoughts about myself or others or the world. And I'm now willing to feel it, even though I don't like it. In this way, you can honor the egoic expression that you have and also allow the larger viewpoint of the self, which is always unconditionally accepting and loving what is. And the reason fear feels bad is not because it's fear, it's because we push it away. And the reason bliss feels good is not because it's something good, it's because we welcome it, we want it, we're open to it, we don't push against it at all. And what if that was the only thing that is making bliss feel different to fear, the amount that we're pushing against it, if at all? It's a revolutionary way to think of the work that we do, perhaps in the embodiment process of this awakening. So if you find that your first response in any moment is to push against what is, can you accept that some part of you will always feel that way? Even now, for me, if some emotion comes up, there's still some part of me that isn't going to want to feel it. And there's also a part of me that's completely allowing it to exist, completely not having any opinion about it at all. And when neither one of those viewpoints is more important to you than the other, there is this kind of processing of this backlog of emotions and seeing that these ideas that have generated them are not really true. And that can happen very, very quickly. You can begin to work through things a lot better. It's not possible to get our ego to our mind, our conditioned mind, our separate sense of self, and using them all as in the same way. It's not possible to get that to act like the self. You cannot get a mechanism that pushes against what is to accept what is. It's never going to work. And I spent a very, very long time trying to do this. And then it occurred to me one day that maybe I don't have to. Maybe I can just accept completely that some part of my being may always be in resistance to what is. And at the same time, there is this other larger part of my being, not better, but just larger, that is totally in love with what is and wants to explore everything about this moment without labeling good or bad, wanted or not wanted. In this way, you can come to really fall in love with your egoic sense of self. Because no awakened being ever really succeeded in dissolving their ego. They just loved it enough that it began to dissolve by itself, which naturally begins to happen when your dominant attitude is not to push against this. Human beings are hardwired to want to feel better and to move away from pain. And as we begin to accept that the best way to feel good is to love what is, that we can feel good in any moment, feel peaceful, even with the presence of a negative emotion. We can feel good, we can feel peaceful, we can feel open and free. Then you really are discovering a key to instant happiness, to instant peace. That no matter what my body and mind are experiencing, I always have the choice whether to only push against it or whether to push against it and also notice this part of me that's not doing that. Just like the space in this room is not pushing against the objects in it, it's just allowing what is to be. It doesn't have any opinions about the objects in the room. It's just totally unconditionally allowing this creation that we've all made. And we've all given birth to these conditioned ways of thinking, and we've practiced them very, very well. And really the last one, or the first one to really begin to release, is this pushing against, rejecting this old viewpoint, this old way of seeing ourselves. You know, we never manage to make our mind go silent. It just becomes less and less relevant what it's doing. What if our ego's job was to push against what is? It does that very, very well, doesn't it? If we're experiencing a positive moment, it wants to keep it longer. If we're experiencing a negative moment, it wants to get rid of it sooner. And it does that perfectly. It's just absolutely perfect at pushing against what is. If we push against that, it's never going to stop. If we allow our ego to totally do its thing, then it's going to begin to melt away. When I really got this, that I always had both these viewpoints in any moment available to me, and that I didn't have to get rid of this other one to begin to experience peace, that it really didn't matter what my mind was thinking, what my body was feeling, because there was unconditional acceptance of that already, being like that silence, choosing that perspective also, not trying to get rid of anything, not even the ego in that moment. And you just cease this internal conflict, this war, this dividing yourself into two constantly, which takes so much energy and a constant rejection of reality, constant rejection of this moment that you are, this silence, this pure sentience, can appear as this contracted, limited self, and it can appear as the vast, infinite, formless reality. And you can embrace both of those aspects of yourself, ultimately. And then you can come to be totally in love with what is. And then it really doesn't matter whether your mind is talking or whether it's quiet. Most times then, of course, it goes quiet by itself because we're not fueling it with this internal conflict. So it's a simple thing to come to understand, but it's fundamental in our awakening process when we can really begin to grasp this. And right now, in this moment, no matter what your mind is thinking and whatever emotions you're feeling, you always have the choice to also notice that part of you that's accepting and allowing. I notice that part of me regularly, easily, that's pushing against what is, that's judging, that's blaming, that's labeling, that's either doing this or doing this. And I can also notice the space in which all of that is going on, the space of my being. I don't have to make either one of those more correct. I don't have to say one's better and one's worse. Because immediately then I go back into division, into being sure that they're two, into being sure that this one has to go and this one needs to stay. And it's possible to live your entire life from this perspective. It's possible to really embrace even the heaviest of emotions and states and experiences from this place. Of course, some part of you is going to want to feel better when you feel bad. Of course, that's true. It's true for everyone all the time. You can't get away from that, can you? And of course, there's always some part of you that's just accepting it as it is. Can you feel the peace when you stop trying to have one or the other of those attitudes only? Naturally, there's an opening, a relaxation into the unconditioned way of viewing everything when you stop dividing yourself. So it's a simple thing to grasp, but can sometimes take a little practice. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be more than happy to about applying it or about anything at all in general. I'd welcome any questions that you do have. If you want to ask a question or share something in your experience this week, feel free to raise your hand on the Zoom here. And then we can do a meditation on, we can actually go into practicing this as well. If you can, begin to feel the peace right now of just accepting all the ways that you're showing up. You begin to get a taste of this. There is nothing wrong with you appearing as conditioned ego and also unconditioned self, because they're not really two, they are one. And you won't even feel divided if you're not pushing against either or trying to get more of this one. So if anyone wants to ask anything. Okay, Steve, whenever you're ready.
Hello, can you hear me all right?
I can, yeah.
Nice to have this meeting. Unexpected. Last few days I've been a bit off it, sucked back into itself, if you like, and I've done my best to just accept it, trying not to push it, whatever it is, and yesterday I was talking to a guy yesterday. I mean, I've been a bit poorly. I think I've been a bit poorly, a bit headachy and this kind of. And I was talking to this friend of mine. And he said, "I've got COVID," and he's telling me symptoms. And as he's telling me symptoms, I thought, "Oh, I wonder about it." And I finished. I convinced myself I got it.
It's like when you start Googling it, isn't it? All of a sudden.
I went YouTube, yeah, YouTube. Yeah. And I definitely had it anyway. But I'm negative. I've had a test. I'm negative, so I've sorted it out. But what I'm thinking at that point, a lot of fear came up around it. You know, I don't know if it's about death or all that gasping for air while you, but a lot of fear. And I'll try it. At a certain point, I thought the numbing had bailed out. There's still certain times, it wasn't just that, but it's still certain time your head so gets sort of, I call it like a worm in your head, you know, you get something going on. You keep going over it and over it. And you try not to push it away, but you sort of look at it and then it goes, then it comes back and then it goes. Then this COVID scare. And even when I'm trying to accept it, deep down, I don't want it. There's that two things going on, you know what I mean? I wonder if that's possible.
It's totally okay to not want it, isn't it? It's totally okay.
That's okay then.
It's totally okay to not want to feel how you feel. You can feel that desire to want to feel better, whether that's physically or emotionally or both. You know, of course you're going to want that. Of course you're going to want that. And also there's another part of you that's totally allowing the way the body feels, the way the emotions feel. It's allowing this desire too, isn't it? It's allowing all of it. It's just happening in that space.
Yes. Get that.
It's like experiencing that very same moment without any should or shouldn't about it. I feel physically bad. I feel emotionally bad. There's a real desire to feel better. And there's just the space of the being in which it's all going on, which isn't pushing against. Just noticing that space. It just softens the resistance in that moment.
Yeah, but my head was like a box of monkeys. It was very hard to feel that spaciousness. You know, it seemed very thinned out right around the edges. You know what I mean? I get a taste of it, but
just to know it's there, just to know it's there is enough. Just to notice there's both aspects of you present. There's this part of you that's really pushing against what is.
Trying not to.
Well, that's what I'm saying, is just let it push against. Absolutely let it push against what is. That's what it does. Right? We're trying so hard to make ego into the self, so to speak. And it's not capable of doing that. We're trying so hard to make something that does this into something that does this. And it can't. So you can just notice this real pushing against and then stop trying to change that. If it's resisting, let it resist completely. Just abandon all attempts to change it. And then it becomes clearer that there's this space in the background that begins to move to the foreground. We just have this idea somehow, don't we, that we can somehow stop the resistance resisting.
Yeah. But in the same time, I'm resisting. I'm resisting now. So if I'm feeling rough, I feel rough. That's it. And it might last a day or two. I'm thinking, I'm getting to know it should go now. And now I think what you're saying is whatever's going on, let it go.
You can't directly control what your mind is thinking, what your emotions are, and how your body feels in that moment. It's just going to feel how it feels. And some large part of that, when your body feels bad or when there's some strong emotion, there's going to be this knee-jerk response in all of us to push against it. I don't want this. It should go away. If you can notice that that feeling comes along with everything else, isn't it? This knee-jerk response, and just let it do its thing. I really don't want to feel like this. I don't want to feel like this. I want to feel better. And also at the same time, in the just acceptance of that's what it's designed to do. That's what mind, ego does really well. It pushes against what is. And it was doing a real good job of that, wasn't it? In those moments.
Good at that, yeah.
Yeah. Is it your job to change that? And can you actually change that?
Well, it seems to fly in the face of if something's bothering you, don't try and what I forgot what we call it now for now, but causality thing. You see, I'm feeling, if I'm not this time, but sometimes I'm feeling a bit not sure about what's happened there and this and the other, you know what I mean? And I can let that be, but a lot of time I just give the guy a ring and no, you were wrong. No, I'm all right, Steve, no problem. You know what I mean? So if that's what's happening too, isn't it? That's what we're saying.
Yeah. Whatever the body and mind do in any moment, we have no direct control over. Or only really we can change that indirectly, what they do, by what we agree with most. If we're not dividing ourselves into this is the right way to be and this is the wrong way, then it's going to resolve itself much faster. It's going to clear up much faster.
On a permanent basis, on about putting the plaster on sometimes. Sometimes I can get myself into a right fuzz, and if I talk to somebody, it stops there. You had it wrong, Steve. You know what I mean?
Both. You know, it's it fix it on the short term, and much more if you begin to see there's some, as a human being, you're self-appearing as a human being as well, and that means to embrace everything it means to be a human being as well, and that is this natural instinct that we have to move away from pain and towards pleasure. We've all got that, haven't we? Nobody likes feeling bad. Everybody wants to feel good or better than we do. And that mechanism is going to play when you feel bad, to push against, try and get away from it. And when you're feeling really good, there's also going to be something going, oh, this is really good. I like this. I want this to carry on. You know, so you just notice that going on and not try to change that. There'll be more peace immediately in that moment. What the body does then, the mind does then, it is going to be from a higher place then, because you're not trying to change. It's like trying to get the ego not to be the ego. It's never going to work, that is it?
No.
You can always notice the ego is just doing its thing inside the greater space of my being. It doesn't have to be something that I don't have to reject ego. And can the self actually do that anyway? Can it really do that?
No, some of that doesn't it? But you've cleared something of it. I thought it was one or the other. You don't go making the phone call. You sit here and sort it out, you know what I mean? And it's not, you can do.
There's ego, again, ego's trying to pick one of two options.
Just suss that, yeah.
Yeah. And it's really all of the above, isn't it? The self selects everything. It can, I want to allow this egoic expression and the greater aspect of my being, and whatever my body and mind does from that place will usually be something effective at resolving the situation.
That'll do. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Lovely. Good to talk to you. Good. Ian?
It's actually me.
Sorry. Hi, Maggie.
It's all right. When you started talking, you just completely, it was like you just were talking about my situation. We had a situation yesterday that was a remnant of the worst situation we've ever had, and it was a much lesser manifestation of it, but it's brought up a lot of emotion, and I don't want to go there again. We don't want to start all this again. And it's been very quiet for 2 years, over 2 years, and I was initially I was able to be, I was okay with it. This is how it's panning out. This is what's happening. But as it built within me, there was a lot of what I've recognised listening to you talk and listening to what Steve said, a lot of resistance. And I was really trying to be okay with this potentially horrible situation that turned out okay in the end. I just wondered whether you could help with that. It was hard to recognise the two choices you've been talking about with Steve. There was a lot of me that was okay. This is here to show me where there's still a belief in this, and there was a lot of thoughts about reflection. I did a lot of writing about it, but there was also a resistance. I do not want this to be happening again. So I wondering whether you could talk about that.
The patterns that have been going for a longer time within us will be the ones where we tend to only or we tend to try to choose one perspective or the other. And of course, it feels better to not believe any thoughts about it when the situation happens. And of course, we want to feel peaceful and all of that, but the things that are still popping up will be the ones where we only take the egoic perspective. And it's usually about the ego. What's left now for most of us is we're quite accepting of most thoughts and emotions in our life. The only area we push against is where our ego pops up again, where we have some judgment of others, or where we reject what is, or where we reject ourselves. So it's perhaps a clearer way to say it is that it'll be those places in your life where you only push against what is, because that will feel very divisive, very separate now. There'll be a lot of conscious thoughts around it. So if you can see when this thing happens, there's this immediate push against it response that you spoke about, mind trying to understand why is it happening, which is a subtle form of pushing against it anyway, and some emotions and all of that, the situation itself. And probably the dominant attitude in that moment that you had inside was, I shouldn't be feeling this way, I shouldn't be thinking this way, I shouldn't be responding this way to this situation. I should be okay with it. But resistance is resistance. It's not acceptance, is it? Resistance is meant to resist. It's never going to accept. So it's where we're trying to get that resistance to turn into acceptance. And it's like trying to get water to run uphill. It's not going to happen.
I think that was what felt like it was the issue. There was a lot of acceptance, but I could feel resistance as well. And it was trying to recognise almost where I should be within it.
Then you can hopefully see that the reason that it felt so bad was because you were trying to pick one or the other.
Yeah.
Like in our the more awakened we're the more we're living as our authentic self, perhaps those moments we're most tested are where the human experience becomes most unpleasant.
Yeah.
And having experienced the peace and the quietness of the self, of course we're going to prefer that to this turmoil, this suddenly everything gets jumbled up again. And it's just that old mechanism functioning that says, no, I don't want this, I want that. I don't want to feel this way, I want to feel that way. We're just trying to pick one or the other. Because ego works in duality, mind works in duality. It sees two ways of handling this. Am I going to be the ego or the self in this moment? And the self says yes to both of it, both ways. And the ego says which one?
Yeah.
Like you can be totally at peace, accepting of what is in this horrible human moment, and totally not enjoying it and wishing it would stop and hoping it never happens again at the same time. They don't have to be opposites, do they?
Okay.
It's happening. I'm totally not liking it, but it's happening. What is what is. And what is never going to change. It already is. What will be can change based on how much we're not dividing ourselves in this moment.
Thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah, thank you.
Good.
Very much.
Good question. Would anyone else like to ask any questions? Okay. We will take a moment then just to maybe practice this, just being with our authentic self, which is inclusive and not separate to that egoic sense of self. We can just, whether we want to call it meditation or not, we can. But just spend some moments now noticing what is. So as we're sitting here together, there can be some thoughts, there can be some emotions. Maybe there's a sense of confusion from what I've said. Maybe there's a sense of clarity. Maybe something's struggling to understand. Maybe something's just quite peaceful. And maybe all of those are happening. Just noticing what is a form of love. So we're just going to notice what is. There is space of your being, and there is the content that's appearing inside that, our mind, our body, our thoughts, our perspectives. And if there's judgments about ourselves, about others, if there's positive or negative emotions, we can simply notice those, that some part of our being is thinking and feeling this way. We can notice. And it may also be a preference to feel a different way. There may be a desire to feel the deep peace, the quietness. So we're just giving permission for our body and mind to feel whatever they're feeling, to be whatever they're being in this moment. Just allowing whatever is happening. If the body's restless, let it be restless. If there's a feeling, I just don't want to be here right now with this, I don't want to do this, we can honor that feeling too. It's authenticity, loving what is, allowing what is. The more we allow what is to be, what will be becomes more and more pleasant. Just accepting however you're showing up in this moment. Some part of that is resistance, it's resistance. Some part is confused, then be confused. Some part is angry, then be angry. Some part is peaceful, then be peaceful. If something's going, I don't get this, can't quite wrap my head around it, totally allowing that to be. Just practicing really allowing this other perspective also, where we're not trying to get rid of anything. Recognizing that what is has already shown up. We're already thinking or feeling or being this way. Just allowing it. Doesn't mean liking it. Just means allowing it. Just practicing allowing what is. The more that we allow what is to be, the more aware we become of the quietness that's there also, the spaciousness that's just allowing. We are very literally being that space that allows whatever to show up. We're not trying to dictate or control or manipulate this moment at all. And in the simple acceptance of what is, without labeling good or bad, wanted, not wanted. Labeling may be going on, it's fine. We're just choosing to also notice that with no labels, that space. Then when we're allowing every way that we want to show up in this moment as this human being with these thoughts and feelings, and also the great space of our being in which human being is appearing. That they're not in conflict with each other at all. And when we allow what is, when we love what is, we're validating its existence. We're affirming its right to be. Perhaps the first time ever, we're not pushing against our own being. We're not pushing against this moment. We're allowing whatever needs to arise. Safe in the understanding, the more we allow and accept, the better the content of our mind is going to be. The better the feeling of our emotions are going to be. The deeper the peace. There is this quietness also that just simply cannot push against. Simply don't resist the resistance. And you're free right now. Simply don't judge the judging. And you're home straight away. Just allowing however you're showing up in this moment and in every moment as you get the hang of this. You always have the choice to love also. Love and judge. Accept and reject. Include and exclude. Gently, gently, we find that the allowing gently supersedes the rejection. The rejection and the resistance is not impacting us so much anymore. And then it's not impacting us at all. It really doesn't matter from here What is just what is. What does it feel like when you allow yourself to be exactly as you are right now? When you allow yourself to bathe in this unconditional love and acceptance of yourself. There is no right way to be. There's just the way you are right now. The way you are right now is the right way to be. Nothing needs to change in order to feel peace. Nothing needs to stop or go away. How you are in this moment is exactly how you're supposed to be. We're just loving what is. Recognizing that when we love what is, we'll really begin to enjoy what will be. We are very literally being our greatest self in this moment, that which allows even the rejection, that which allows even the resistance, that which loves even the hatred, that which loves even the judgment, that which is incapable of rejection. recognizing that we can allow and accept and love any moment we choose to, that it's available all throughout the day. We can choose this. Simply by choosing it, it will get easier and easier to love, to accept even what we previously thought was unlovable. Thank you very much. Namaste.